They look at you before you even open your mouth, necks twisting, eyes lingering a second too long. Not because you asked for it, but because something about you refuses to stay invisible. You walk into ordinary places and suddenly the air shifts, whispers start. People wonder what changed. Was it confidence? Was it pain? Was it the moment you stopped waiting for permission? The truth is, glow isn't makeup or spotlight or luck. It's what happens when you've been cracked enough times and decided to stand anyway. When your scars stop apologizing and start announcing your presence. When you stop blending in and start existing loudly without saying a word. Because nothing unsettles the world more than someone who knows who they are and doesn't beg to be accepted. You don't need an announcement. No drum roll, no spotlight hunting you down. Because the moment you step in, something shifts without asking your permission. Conversations lose rhythm, laughter stutters, eyes lift on instinct like the room itself sensed a disturbance, not loud, not flashy. Just undeniable. Presence isn't about being seen, it's about being felt. It's the quiet tension that creeps in when someone walks like they've already survived what others are afraid of. Shoulders relaxed not because life is easy, but because fear already tried and failed. You don't rush to fill space. You let space bend around you, and that's what makes people uncomfortable. They expect noise, they expect effort, but instead they get stillness with weight behind it. The kind that makes mirrors honest and egos nervous. Presence is knowing you belong before anyone agrees. It's standing in a room full of opinions without shrinking your spine to fit them. It's not arrogance. Arrogance begs to be noticed. Presence doesn't care if it's noticed. It knows it will be. People confuse presence with confidence, but confidence can be borrowed. Rehearsed, faked for applause. Presence is earned in private moments where nobody clapped, where you learned how to sit with your own thoughts without running from them, where you lost pieces of yourself and came back rearranged but intact. When you carry that kind of history in your posture, rooms respond, floors feel different under your feet. The air thickens just enough for people to sense something they can't name. They'll say you have an aura, energy, vibe, anything except the truth, that you're no longer asking the world how to be treated. You've already decided, and decision is louder than words. You don't dominate the room adjusts to you. Chairs don't scrape for attention, voices lower without instruction. Even silence seems to pay attention. Presence isn't about walking in like a hero. It's walking in like a survivor who stopped explaining themselves. You don't scan faces for approval. You don't rehearse smiles to disarm strangers. You let discomfort exist because you've learned it doesn't kill you. And that scares people more than confidence ever could, because it reminds them how much of themselves they keep hidden just to be liked. Your presence becomes a mirror, and not everyone enjoys what they see. You don't need to speak first. Sometimes not at all, because presence speaks in timing, in restraint, in the way you listen, like you're not desperate to interrupt reality. People lean in, not because you demand attention, but because attention wants to be near you. Presence is when your stillness has gravity, when even chaos pauses to figure you out, when your calm feels earned, not practiced. And the funny part is you didn't chase this. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be magnetic. It grew quietly while you were busy surviving storms no one clapped for. While you learned how to stand alone without turning bitter. While you stopped explaining your wounds to people who only wanted entertainment. That's when presence shows up. Uninvited but permanent. And once it's there, rooms don't forget it. Even after you leave, the echo lingers, chairs feel emptier. Conversations feel flatter. People try to recreate the feeling, but they can't borrow what you paid for. Presence isn't an act. It's a consequence, and once you carry it, everywhere you go, the room knows before the people do. Chaos didn't knock politely, it kicked the door in, rearranged everything you thought you knew, laughed while doing it, and left you standing in the mess wondering whether to collapse or adapt. And that's where this kind of confidence is born, not in comfort, not in applause, but in moments where you realize panic won't save you and pretending definitely won't. So you start learning how to breathe in the middle of madness, how to smile when nothing makes sense, how to keep your balance while the ground argues with your feet. This isn't the shiny confidence people post about, the kind that comes from winning once and thinking the world is fair. This is the confidence that crawls out of chaos with bruises still fresh, the kind that knows exactly how ugly things can get and walks forward anyway, because when you've already stared at your worst days without flinching, opinions start sounding like background noise. Chaos teaches you that control is a myth, but composure is a weapon. You didn't become confident by feeling strong. You became confident by surviving moments where you felt weak and didn't disappear. Every breakdown that didn't finish you added weight to your spine. Every laugh in the middle of disaster taught you that fear doesn't own the room unless you hand it the keys. Chaos strips you of illusions, and in that empty space you find something solid, not hope, not optimism. Just a grounded certainty that you can handle more than you thought. People think confidence means certainty, but chaos teaches you how to move without it, to make decisions with shaking hands, to speak even when your voice isn't steady, to stand even when your legs remember every fall. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't crack under pressure, because it was forged inside it. You stop asking, "What if this goes wrong?" and start thinking, "I've been here before, just in different colors." Chaos also teaches you humor, dark, sharp, honest humor. The kind that keeps you sane when everything else feels scripted to break you. You learn how to laugh at the absurdity of it all, how to grin when plans collapse, how to find clarity in confusion. That smile isn't happiness, it's defiance. It's saying you don't get to erase me just because you shook the board, and somewhere along the way, confidence stops being loud. It becomes unsettlingly calm. You don't rush to prove yourself, because chaos already tested you. You don't need validation because survival validated you. When people try to intimidate you, you recognize the move. You've seen worse threats in quieter rooms. When situations spiral, you don't panic, you observe, because chaos trained your eyes to stay open when others shut down. This confidence doesn't announce itself. It watches, it waits. It chooses its moments. It knows timing matters more than force. Chaos taught you patience, taught you that reacting too fast is just another form of fear. So you pause, let things unfold, let people reveal themselves. And when you act, it's deliberate, precise, unsettling. The irony is chaos was never trying to build you, it was trying to break you. But in resisting, adapting, refusing to disappear, you learned how to trust yourself in unstable conditions, and that trust is dangerous, because once you believe you can handle disorder, nothing really controls you anymore. Not circumstances, not people, not expectations. You stop clinging to outcomes and start mastering responses, and that's when confidence stops being something you wear and becomes something you radiate, something unpredictable. Something that makes people uneasy because they can't tell what rattles you. They can't tell how much chaos it would take to knock you off balance. And the truth is you don't even know yourself. You just know it would take more than this, more than them, more than whatever storm is currently pretending to be the end. Pain didn't arrive with lessons or warnings. It showed up raw and careless, cutting deeper than expected, overstaying its welcome, repeating itself until excuses ran out. And at first it felt useless, like damage without purpose, like something that only took and never gave. But pain has a strange habit of revealing value once you stop trying to escape it. Once you stop asking why and start asking what now. At the beginning, pain weakens you. It bends your posture, lowers your voice, teaches you hesitation, but stay with it long enough and it starts changing texture. It sharpens awareness, strips illusions, burns away the parts of you that relied on comfort to function. You stop flinching at discomfort because pain already introduced itself in worse forms. It becomes familiar, not friendly, but manageable. Most people try to numb pain, drown it, distract it. But refinement doesn't happen through avoidance. It happens through exposure, through sitting with the ache long enough to understand its shape, its rhythm, its triggers. You begin to notice patterns, how pain always attacks expectations first, how it targets ego before strength, how it forces honesty when pretending gets too expensive. Pain teaches precision. When everything hurts, you stop wasting energy. You choose words carefully, movements carefully, people carefully. Tolerance shrinks, but clarity expands. You no longer entertain nonsense because pain already took enough from you. You stop explaining yourself because pain already heard every excuse and rejected them. Refinement is subtraction, not addition. There's a moment when pain stops feeling personal, when you realize it wasn't sent to punish you, but to expose you, to show you where you were fragile, where you relied too much on approval, comfort, certainty, and once exposed, you start rebuilding with intention, not softer, stronger, not louder, sharper. Power doesn't come from pain itself. It comes from what you do with it. Untreated pain leaks into bitterness, arrogance, cruelty. But refined pain turns inward before it turns outward. It makes you disciplined, controlled, unpredictable, in a quiet way. You don't explode anymore. You calculate. You don't react immediately. You observe. Pain slowed you down just enough to think your tone changes, not aggressive, measured. Your presence changes, not intimidating, deliberate. People sense something different, not warmth, not hostility, restraint. Because refined pain doesn't need to announce itself. It sits behind your eyes, steady, patient. Waiting pain also teaches boundaries. The hard kind, the ones you don't negotiate. You learn who gets access and who gets distance, not out of hatred but efficiency. Pain made you expensive, not in ego, in energy. You don't give yourself away casually anymore. Refinement is when pain stops screaming and starts working, when it becomes fuel instead of fire, when the same experiences that once broke you now inform your decisions, sharpen your instincts, warn you before danger repeats itself. You don't need advice as much. Pain already taught you consequences. People who haven't refined their pain confuse this calm with coldness. They mistake restraint for lack of feeling. But it's the opposite. You feel deeply. You just don't bleed publicly anymore. You learned that not every wound deserves an audience. Not every scar needs explanation, and the unsettling part is this version of you wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to survive with dignity. Pain refined your reactions, your standards, your silence. It taught you that power isn't loud recovery, it's quiet control. It's knowing exactly how much you can endure and choosing not to prove it. Knowing exactly what hurts you and no longer handing it permission. Knowing exactly who you are after the damage and refusing to apologize for the shape you had to take. Silence is usually mistaken for absence, weakness, emptiness, but that's only because most people use noise to hide, to distract, to soften the truth about themselves, while silence does the opposite. It exposes, it sharpens, it strips away decoration until only intent is left. And when silence comes from someone who has nothing to prove, it starts to feel heavy, uncomfortable, commanding. This kind of silence isn't shy. It's deliberate, it's chosen, not forced. It's what happens when you've realized that words are often the cheapest currency in the room. Thrown around to buy validation, to avoid accountability, to mask insecurity. And once you stop overspending them, every pause starts to matter. People expect explanations, reactions, defenses, especially when they test you, provoke you, question you. But silence disrupts the script. It denies them the satisfaction of control. It leaves space where they expected resistance. And in that space, their own noise turns against them. They talk more, reveal more, unravel themselves while you remain still. Silence commands attention because it refuses to compete. It doesn't chase the spotlight. It lets the spotlight wander and eventually settle on it out of curiosity, unease, respect, sometimes fear. Because silence suggests certainty, it suggests that you know something others don't, or that you don't need them to know anything at all. There's power in not rushing to respond, in letting moments breathe, in allowing tension to exist without immediately resolving it. Most people panic around tension. They fill it with jokes, excuses, aggression, anything to regain comfort. But when you're comfortable in silence, you control the tempo, and tempo controls the room. Silence also protects you. It keeps your intentions clean, your plans unreadable, your emotions unexploited. When you speak less, you leak less. People can't use your words against you if you don't give them the ammunition. They can't predict your moves if you don't narrate them. This silence wasn't learned in comfort. It was learned in moments where speaking changed nothing, where explaining yourself only deepened the wound, where being loud didn't equal being heard, so you adapted. You learned to watch, to listen, to let people show you who they are without interruption. And something changes when you stop reacting out loud. Your expressions become subtler, your movements slower, your presence steadier. People start paying attention to your eyes, your posture, your timing. Because they're searching for signals you're no longer handing out freely. Your silence turns into a language, and not everyone speaks it. This kind of silence makes people nervous because it removes leverage. They can't tell if you agree or disagree, if you're offended or amused, if you're about to walk away or take control. Uncertainty unsettles those who rely on manipulation, and silence creates uncertainty. By default, silence also demands self-control. You can't hide behind it if your mind is chaotic. Real silence requires inner order, otherwise it cracks, leaks, betrays you. So you learn to regulate your thoughts, your impulses, your reactions, not for appearances, but for command. And when you finally speak, it lands differently, because words coming out of silence carry weight. They're measured, intentional, unavoidable. People listen not because you're loud, but because you're rare, because you didn't waste the moment. Silence that commands attention isn't empty. It's concentrated. It's everything you chose not to say, standing behind what you did. It's restraint sharpened into presence. It's power without performance. And once you learn how to wield it, you realize the loudest voice in the room is often the one that didn't rush to speak at all. Owning who you are isn't a declaration. It's a refusal to keep editing yourself to make other people comfortable. A refusal to dilute your edges just so you fit into rooms that were never built for you. Most people don't lose themselves all at once. They give themselves away in pieces, a tone softened here, an opinion swallowed there, a laugh forced, a truth delayed, until one day they can't tell what's theirs anymore. Unapologetic doesn't mean loud or reckless. It means settled. It means you've stopped negotiating with strangers about your worth. You know your flaws, you know your contradictions, and you don't rush to defend or decorate them, because defense implies doubt, and doubt already had enough of your time. At first, owning your identity feels dangerous because it costs approval. People who benefited from your silence don't applaud. When you find your voice, people who like the version of you that bent easily get uncomfortable when you stop bending. They'll say you've changed, like growth is an accusation, like becoming whole is betrayal, but unapologetic identity isn't about rebelling against people. It's about aligning with yourself. It's about waking up and not rehearsing who you need to be today to survive socially, emotionally. Professionally, it's about letting your values decide your behavior instead of fear deciding your mask. You stop over-explaining, because explanations invite debate, and your existence isn't a debate topic. You stop shrinking your opinions to avoid tension, because tension reveals truth faster than comfort ever could. You stop apologizing for boundaries, because boundaries are not insults. They're instructions. Owning your identity also means accepting that not everyone will like you, and not everyone is supposed to. Approval isn't a requirement for legitimacy, and once that sinks in, something clicks. You move differently, speak differently, choose differently, not to provoke, but because pretending feels heavier than honesty. There's a quiet confidence that comes from this, not the kind that performs, the kind that rests. You're not scanning reactions after you speak, not replaying conversations in your head, looking for mistakes. You said what you meant. You meant what you said, and the world can respond however it wants. Unapologetic doesn't mean you stop learning or evolving. It means you stop evolving for applause. Growth becomes internal, intentional, not a response to pressure. You refine yourself because it aligns with you, not because someone else demanded a version that was easier to consume. People who don't own their identity find this threatening, because it exposes how much they compromise themselves daily. Your certainty feels like judgment to them even when you didn't say a word. They'll project, criticize, label you difficult, intense, arrogant, but labels are just attempts to regain control. Owning your identity also requires accepting solitude at times, because authenticity filters your circle. Not everyone can stay when you stop performing, but the ones who do aren't there for the act. They're there for the real thing, and that changes the quality of connection completely. You stop chasing belonging and start creating it within yourself first. You become your own reference point, your own permission slip, your own standard, and once that happens, you're harder to manipulate, harder to guilt, harder to intimidate, because you're not outsourcing your self-worth anymore. There's a kind of calm that comes with this, a grounded stillness. You're no longer split between who you are and who you present. That internal alignment sharpens everything, your decisions, your boundaries, your silence, your presence. You're not perfect, not polished, but you're real, and real carries a weight that performance never can. Owning your identity unapologetically is not about becoming fearless. It's about becoming honest enough that fear doesn't get the final say. It's choosing yourself repeatedly even when it costs comfort, popularity, or familiarity. Because once you've lived as yourself, going back to pretending feels like the real loss. Fame usually arrives with noise, cameras, applause, names repeated until they lose meaning. But visibility doesn't need any of that. Visibility can happen quietly, accidentally, even unwillingly. It's what happens when something about you refuses to stay small, when your presence interrupts patterns without trying to, when people notice you not because you demanded attention, but because ignoring you takes effort. Becoming visible without permission means you stopped asking first, not verbally, internally. You stopped checking if it was okay to take up space, to speak honestly, to exist fully. Most people are trained to wait, to be invited, to be chosen, to be validated before they show up as themselves. But permission is just a leash that looks polite. You didn't wake up one day deciding to stand out. You woke up tired of shrinking, tired of diluting your thoughts, your energy, your instincts just to keep things smooth, tired of being palatable. And that exhaustion did something dangerous. It freed you. Because once you stop trying to be digestible, you become undeniable. Visibility, like This isn't flashy. It's unsettling. People sense it before they understand it. They feel it in the way you walk without hesitation, in the way you don't rush to explain yourself, in the way you don't react on cue. They can't categorize you easily, and what can't be categorized draws attention. You become visible because you're no longer hiding, not behind politeness, not behind roles, not behind expectations. You show up whole, contradictions included. And that wholeness disrupts environments built on fragments. People look because they're trying to figure out what rule you're not following. This kind of visibility doesn't ask to be liked. It accepts being observed, judged, misunderstood, because approval stopped being the goal. Alignment became the priority. You'd rather be seen accurately by a few than falsely by everyone. And that choice sharpens your presence. People think visibility comes from performance, but performance fades when the act ends. Authenticity lingers, even when you're silent, even when you leave the room. They remember the feeling, not the details. The sense that something real passed through, something unscripted becoming visible without permission also means accepting consequences. Not everyone applauds when you stop blending in. Some people feel threatened, exposed, challenged, because your visibility reminds them of their own invisibility to themselves. They'll project motives, assign labels, invent narratives, but none of that makes you smaller unless you agree to it. You don't correct every misunderstanding, because clarity doesn't always require explanation. Sometimes it requires consistency, showing up as yourself again and again until the noise around you loses credibility. Visibility becomes stable when it's rooted in truth, not reaction. There's also risk in this. Being seen means being vulnerable to criticism, envy, misinterpretation. But hiding costs more, hiding drains energy, fractures identity, turns life into a performance review. And once you've tasted what it feels like to exist without permission, the risk feels worth it. Visibility without permission isn't rebellion. It's resolution. It's deciding that your existence doesn't need a stamp of approval, that your voice doesn't need an invitation, that your presence doesn't need to be earned through compliance. You start noticing how people respond differently, how some lean in, curious, how others pull back, defensive. Both reactions confirm the same thing. You're no longer invisible, not because you're loud, but because you're aligned, and the strangest part is how natural it starts to feel. Like this was always the default and shrinking was the detour. You stop performing visibility and simply exist in it, letting attention come and go without chasing or fearing it. Understanding that being seen isn't about fame. It's about refusing to disappear, even when disappearing would be easier.